Hi, this is Jackie. I have been doing some videos on New Age Christianity. Hopefully you may have watched some of the previous ones. I'm back with another one, and I haven't done any for a while, and so I just wanted to kind of give people an update on what's been going on. I've had a lot going on health-wise. I had a mishap with my tooth, so if I forget and smile, you'll see a gap there. And I also had COVID, so I've been recovering from that. But a lot of the reason that I haven't been doing videos for a while is that I have always felt that what's on these videos is not my content. I feel that I'm being guided by God, by the Holy Spirit, and I always ask for that guidance before I do a video. And I just haven't had any for a while. So I figured, okay, must be time for me to take a break. But in the last few weeks, I have been getting some guidance. What I've done in my first 10 videos was try to give a basic understanding of New Age Christianity as it is found in the Aquarian Gospel. And I've done a lot of comparing and contrasting New Age Christianity with Orthodox Christianity, explaining what beliefs are the same, which ones are different. Also, I've done some comparing New Age Christianity with non-Christian New Age beliefs as well, just to kind of give people a background of what New Age Christianity is all about. But right now, I am feeling guided to delve a little more deeply into particular passages of the Aquarian Gospel and kind of study them in a little more detail and talk about how they may relate to our lives, kind of like you would study passages from the Bible. And I just want to say again what I always say: take what resonates from these videos and leave the rest. We're not all in the same place, on the same spiritual path. And a principle of New Age is kind of, that you have your own guidance. So if you think this is just the craziest thing you've ever heard of, just leave it. If it really resonates and you have an aha moment, that's great too. The previous videos, if you want to go back and take a look at them, if you missed them and you want a little more grounding into New Age Christianity, you can find them on my Facebook and Instagram. And also the transcripts for all of my videos are always on my blog, which is at jacquelinejoan.com. Okay, so I'm going to get started with this one. I also wanted to mention I have been posting Aquarian Gospel passages every Sunday on my Facebook. I call it Sundays with the Aquarian Gospel. So you can look back at those if you're interested. So the passage I want to talk about today actually was one that I posted a couple weeks ago on a Sunday. It's found in the 119th chapter of the Aquarian Gospel, verses 19 to 22. Jesus is teaching his disciples, and he says, quote, "When men defy their consciences and listen not to what they say, the heart is grieved, and they become unfitted for the work of life, and thus they sin. The conscience may be taught. One man may do in conscience what another cannot do. What is a sin for me to do may not be a sin for you to do. The place you occupy upon the way of life determines what is sin. There is no changeless law of good, for good and evil are both judged by other things." Unquote. Now, if you're an Orthodox Christian, this passage probably really caught your attention and raised some questions. Might have even raised some red flags for you. Because Orthodox Christianity has always taught that there are definite rights and wrongs, definite things that are defined as sin. This passage kind of turns out on its head, and it's saying that what is a sin depends on who you are. Now, how in the world is that possible? Well, I think you need to understand a little bit of New Age spirituality for that to make any sense. In New Age spirituality, including New Age Christian spirituality, It's based to a large extent on the notion that anyone can have direct contact with God, source, spirit, whatever name you want to use. Each of us can receive guidance from God directly. And I think that's what this passage is all about. It talks about not defying your conscience. If your conscience tells you something is or is not sin, then you should listen and act accordingly. And it actually defines sin as not following your conscience. St. Paul says something kind of similar to that in the Bible when he talks about eating meat that's sacrificed to idols. He talks about people that have what he calls a weak conscience, that can't, in good conscience, eat meat that's sacrificed to idols. And he goes on to say, even though it doesn't bother his conscience to do that, out of consideration for those that are bothered by it, he won't do it. So he's kind of saying the same thing there, actually. But why would one person's conscience define something as sin and another person's doesn't? Well, again, I think this goes back to the fact that we're all on our own spiritual paths, and that's fine. It's no better to be on one path than the other. It's not anybody's further along on their path than you are in yours or anything. Each person is exactly where they're supposed to be at this time. But what our conscience tells us is sin is going to depend on what path we're on and where we are on the path. And I think this is what Jesus means in this passage when he says the place you occupy on the way of life determines what is sin. In other words, the place you are on your spiritual path. So, if everyone is following their own conscience and sin is different for everyone, doesn't that make life kind of pretty chaotic with no absolutes? Well, yeah, it kind of does. And I think it's always easier in some ways to live in a world where everything's black and white, right and wrong, definite, where we don't have to navigate through any of the gray areas, where we don't have to think or wrestle with our conscience, just follow the rules. I think that the majority of people prefer certainty over uncertainty. But in this case, I think there's a price to be paid for the certainty of having a rule book to follow. And that price is the loss of the opportunity to listen directly to God and to follow the guidance that God gives you just for you at this particular place in your life. It's very, very, customized for you. This is what God is telling you today. This is how God is guiding you right now versus some generalized rules that were set down, thousands of years ago. But I think that this passage has another really important implication for our lives as well, especially in the times in which we find ourselves. It pretty well precludes us from judging other people. Now, you may have noticed that judgment is everywhere. Sometimes it seems like it's a national pastime, especially if you're on social media very much. Christians judge each other, people of different political beliefs judge each other, even actually people in the spiritual community judge each other as well. Nobody seems to be exempt from this. Now, in the Bible, Jesus very clearly condemns judging others, and I think this passage from the Aquarian Gospel clarifies why. If we are each following our own guidance from Spirit, depending on what path we're on, then how can we judge someone else just because they're on a different path? And so the guidance they have right now is different. So many examples come to mind here. To one person, abortion is a sin. To another, it's not. One person sincerely believes homosexuality is a sin. Somebody else doesn't. Someone might think it's a sin to drink alcohol or eat meat or use marijuana, and somebody else might be perfectly fine with it. And what's interesting is, as a person moves along forward on their path and continues to listen to the Holy Spirit, their view may change on something. Today, for example, they might think eating meat is fine, and tomorrow their conscience might tell them otherwise. And again, that really isn't a problem. That's called spiritual growth or spiritual evolution. When we run into trouble is when we think our definition is the only correct one, and then we try to force it on someone else in order to, quote, save them from their sin. There is no changeless law of good, Jesus says. Wow, think about that for a sec. There is no changeless law of good. That is a really revolutionary concept. Now, of course, we have to distinguish here between the laws of society and the spiritual laws that Jesus is talking about. As human beings living together in society, we have to agree upon certain laws that guide our conduct so we can live together. So no matter how much your conscience may be telling you, and I don't know why it would if you're actually listening to God, but no matter how much you might think your conscience is telling you it's okay to go murder somebody, you can't do that because we have decided as a society that that's not going to be allowed. So what we're talking about here is looking at it from a spiritual standpoint, not the laws that we've created so we can have an orderly, safe society. On a spiritual level, though, if we really believe what Jesus says here, we'd each mind our own business. We would concern ourselves with following our conscience and our guidance, and we would quit worrying so much about what other people believe and do. And I don't know about you, but I can't help but think the world would be a whole lot better place. It would run much more smoothly if we all did that. That's all I have for today. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.